continuing with the mandates discussion as we go along on the episodes. So you might have to expand a bit on this question just to provide a better feedback and for our viewers there. But this one is just one sentence, and it says that please briefly discuss why one is not allowed to have a sole mandate clause in a lease agreement and the consequences if one does have such a clause.
Cool. So practically speaking, again, when we start having conversations around mandates, so remember, mandate is an instruction, an engagement. You can call it an agreement, a service level agreement, whatever you want, between the landlord, typically in these instances, and the estate agent. Whether it's a procurement mandate where the estate agent's only responsible for finding a tenant, versus, for example, a management or a management mandate where the estate agent or the leasing agent is responsible for ensuring that, whatever the premises are, kept up, there's inspections, that any inquiries from the tenants are dealt with, right? So we did discuss previously the mandates that are normally involved in the rental space, and those are the two mandates that we see in practice, right? Now, the basis of this question is to try and take a mandate that doesn't really fall within this sphere, sales mandate, where an estate agent would now be the sole agent entitled to sell this property. So we're trying to take a principle outside of the scope, and we're trying to, for lack of better words, you're trying to force it into this rental landscape, right? We're trying to include it in mandates, as an example, that don't typically have these clauses in them. Now, if it was simply a matter of including something in the sales sphere in a procurement mandate or a management mandate, you could probably get away with it. Now, the question is, can it actually be included in the lease agreement? So now the lease agreement typically has nothing to do with the agent. The lease agreement is between the landlord and the tenant. So my off-the-cuff answer is to say that if you try and include a clause that gives you rights and entitlement in an agreement that has actually nothing to do with you, you're already asking for trouble, because it's not clean. Sometimes it's argued whether you properly accepted it, because now you as an agent are responsible for signing this agreement. So now there's three parties that sign this agreement, and very often the agents don't actually go off and sign lease agreements, right? So I do feel that there is people are trying to forcefully merge these two concepts together, and I do feel from a neatness perspective, keeping them apart is probably the best option. So if you feel that the landlord should be giving you a sole mandate that during the next year or within a certain period, or if he decides to sell, the mandate comes to you, I would probably suggest get that signed independently, because you want to be able to enforce it, because that actually sounds like a pretty good deal. If you're putting it into a lease agreement and the landlord didn't expect it to be there, there's even arguments in terms of the things like the Consumer Protection Act that go, hold on, wait, I didn't actually realize I was engaging you on these terms. It wasn't made clear. I signed this agreement, and maybe I didn't read it, but the reality is I thought it was a lease agreement. And now all of a sudden you're telling me it's not a lease agreement, it's something else. And the courts have found this plenty of times where people understood that they were getting they were getting a loan, and it turns out that there was something in the agreement that made it a sale, and people took transfers of properties by force because the people supposed to repay the loan didn't repay the loan, and they were basically tricked into losing their properties because they defaulted on the loan, and the person had a power of attorney and took transfer of the properties, and the courts have ruled against that. So the only time something like this, where you can merge these two worlds, the sale and rental worlds together, possibly, in my opinion, is if you happen to find this tenant and you're managing the relationship between the tenant and the landlord. And in this lease agreement, you have a clause that says that if these two parties decide that they want to engage each other on a sale, that you were the effective cause of that sale, and by virtue of that, you're entitled to a commission. That, for me, is neat. It's still a merger of these two worlds, but it works because you are basically getting them to acknowledge that there was an introduction. Your primary mandate isn't the sale, but you're saying that if it so happens that they decide to buy and sell, that you gain some benefit from it. That I can live with. Trying to include a sole mandate where the landlord somehow restrict himself from being able to give this to any other agent. It's hidden in a lease agreement. Not neat. I wouldn't suggest it. Probably the landlord would probably have good grounds to push back. And if you did include it possibly in the rental mandate, so let's say in the management mandate, that would maybe make more sense because at least it's a mandate between you and the landlord. But even there, I would rather be very express about what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to get a sales mandate, say that you're trying to get a sales mandate and justify why you feel that you're supposed to be getting a sales mandate. Because remember, ethically, why would that be allowable? Why would the landlord be forced to give you a sole mandate when he really just came to you for you to find a tenant or manage a property? So there has to be a very upfront conversation as to why a landlord gives up his rights like that, when typically in the industry that isn't a norm. So just be very careful about that sort of thing. I would rather be clean and upfront about it and let the landlord know exactly what your intent is.
Yeah. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Bruno, for expanding on that question. And then we will obviously be continuing with the mandates and be taking more questions and giving more answers. And maybe we'll create a playlist as well. So that does bring us to the end of today's episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you guys again next week.
Cool. Thanks so much.